This story is presented by Creepy Misterey, written by Robert E. Howard. The following story is a descent into madness, a journey into the unknown horrors that lurk beyond the veil of human understanding. Prepare yourself, for what you are about to hear is not for the faint of heart. The Forbidden Texts. The journey into madness began, as many do, with a book best left unread. The narrator, a scholar of ancient religions and occult practices, had always been fascinated by the idea that there were things in this world older than humanity itself, things forgotten, things erased from history. It was during his research in a musty, dimly lit library in Budapest that he first stumbled upon the name the Black Stone. He had been studying the infamous von Juntz's unsettling culten, a book known among occultists as the Nameless Cults, a collection of terrifying and blasphemous knowledge. The author, Friedrich Wilhelm von Juntz, had spent his life gathering whispered legends and forbidden rites, compiling them into a single volume that was banned in multiple countries for its disturbing content. Von Juntz had died under mysterious circumstances, his throat ripped out as if by claws, just months after publishing the first edition. Some believed he had uncovered something in his research that did not want to be known. As the narrator flipped through the brittle pages, his fingers trembled. The book was filled with half-deciphered runes, grotesque illustrations, and fragmented passages about forgotten gods and rituals performed under moons that had long since faded from the night sky. But one passage in particular seized his attention. It spoke of the Black Stone, a monolith of unnatural origin standing alone in a remote valley of the Hungarian mountains, worshipped by a race of beings that predated mankind. According to the text, these beings were not human, not even earthly, but something else, something that had come from the vast void of blackness beyond the stars. They had walked the earth long before man, and they had left behind traces of their presence. The Black Stone was one such trace. Von Juntz had described it as smooth and unmarked, yet deeply unnatural. He had written that those who stared at it for too long would experience visions of things they should not see, that the monolith was a doorway rather than a monument, a relic of something that was never meant to be remembered. There were accounts of travelers who sought it out, and what became of them. A Turkish explorer in the 17th century had recorded seeing the monolith in his personal journal. He had described the way the shadows around it moved of their own will and how the air near it felt heavy, thick with something unseen. He had written one final entry. "The moon is full. The voices call. I must go." He was never heard from again. A Catholic missionary in the early 19th century had warned against going near the Black Stone, claiming it was a relic of devils. He had disappeared from his mission a week later. His body was later found mutilated beyond recognition, his hands carved with symbols unknown to any language. A group of villagers in the 1870s had attempted to destroy the stone, believing it to be cursed. They had taken axes and hammers, striking it until their hands bled. But by morning, all of them were dead. Not by wounds, but by pure, unexplainable terror. Their faces had been frozen in expressions of unspeakable horror, their eyes wide as if they had seen something beyond human comprehension. The more the narrator read, the more his curiosity became an obsession. Could such a thing really exist? Was it still standing? If it was just an ancient myth, why did every mention of it seem to end in madness or death? He had to know. Ignoring the warnings, dismissing the tales as superstitions and exaggerations, he resolved to find the Black Stone himself. He had no idea that, in doing so, he was sealing his fate. The journey into darkness. The narrator's obsession with the Black Stone had taken root deep in his mind. He could think of little else. Days passed in feverish research, scouring every source he could find, old travelogues, forgotten folklore, even whispered legends among the superstitious. Most Hungarian scholars refused to discuss the monolith, either dismissing it as a myth or becoming visibly uneasy at the mention of its name. But after much persistence, the narrator uncovered a single clue, a cryptic passage from an old book, half destroyed by time, Beyond the village of Strigwaver, where the mountains stretch like the claws of the old gods, the black stone waits. In the valley where the sun dares not linger, it stands alone. The echoes of its past remain, and those who seek it must not listen to the whispers. With this fragment as his only guide, the narrator set out on his journey. but into something far worse. The first nightmare. He found himself standing in the valley once more, the black stone towering before him, but the landscape was different. The moon above was far too large, its pale light casting the world in a sickly glow. The trees surrounding the clearing were no longer twisted, lifeless things. They pulsed as if breathing. The earth beneath his feet shifted like something stirred beneath it. Then he saw them. Figures moved in the darkness, inhuman. Silhouettes, writhing in silent reverence around the black stone. Their limbs bent in unnatural ways, their bodies elongated, their faces, if they had faces, hidden beneath ancient hoods of tattered black cloth. A chant rose from them, a soundless hymn that he did not hear with his ears but felt inside his skull. It was an ancient language, something primal, forgotten, inhuman. Then one of them turned toward him. Where a face should have been, there was only a void, an endless abyss of shifting blackness. The chanting grew louder. He could not move. The black stone shuddered. Echoes of a forgotten time. His vision blurred. The valley shifted around him, and suddenly he was no longer standing in the present. He was witnessing something from long ago. The sky above him was not the sky of Earth, but something alien. The stars were unfamiliar, forming constellations that had no name. The land itself felt younger, untouched by man, and yet it was already tainted. The monolith was there, but it was not alone. At its base, figures stood in a perfect circle, their arms outstretched. They were not human, not entirely. Their skin was wrong, their proportions slightly distorted, their mouths far too wide, filled with jagged teeth meant for something other than speaking. And they were summoning something. The ground trembled, the shadows deepened, and from beyond the veil of reality, something immense began to take form. A shape too vast to comprehend, shifting and writhing, its edges impossible to define. It was not of this world, not of any world that should exist. And then, it noticed him. The awakening. The narrator jerked awake, gasping. His body was drenched in sweat, his limbs trembling violently. The air in the room was thick, suffocating, as if something unseen still lingered. The whisper a whisper on the wind. Then the chanting began. The same eerie voices from his dreams surrounded him, though he saw no one. The shadows moved unnaturally, shifting against the trees in a way that defied logic. Then he saw them, the cultists, but these were no ordinary men. Their faces were twisted, distorted, their eyes hollow pits of darkness. Their bodies seemed half-formed, shifting between human and something else. They moved toward him, their hands reaching, their mouths stretching into unnatural grins. Panicked, he ran. But the forest itself seemed to twist around him. No matter which way he turned, the black stone was always ahead. The ground beneath his feet pulsed like a living thing, and the sky above bled darkness. And then he saw it. The entity from his dream, no longer a vision, but a terrible reality. It loomed over the monolith, its form impossible to comprehend, shifting between infinite horrors. It had no eyes, yet it saw into his soul. It had no mouth, yet its voice filled his mind, whispering secrets not meant for the human brain. With a single thought, it invaded his mind, unraveling his sanity. He screamed, clutching his head, but there was no escaping it. The knowledge it forced upon him was too vast, too horrifying. His body collapsed, but his mind would never be free. The aftermath. The narrator never truly left the valley. Even after he fled, escaping the cursed land under a sky too dark, something remained with him. The mark on his arm never faded. It burned beneath his skin in moments of silence, pulsing like a second heartbeat. At first, he convinced himself that the nightmares would stop once he was far enough away, that the whispers would fade, that he could forget. He was wrong. The curse of knowing. No one believed him. When he spoke of the black stone, of the shifting shadows and the things that had noticed him, people dismissed it as madness. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps he had lost his mind. But if that were true, why did his reflection no longer look like him? Why did his shadow, on certain nights, seem to move on its own? Why did he see figures in his peripheral vision, waiting in doorways, watching from mirrors? And why, when he woke in the middle of the night, did he sometimes find himself standing outside, barefoot in the cold, staring up at the sky, at a moon that was too large, too close, too wrong? The final revelation. It was no longer just nightmares. They were calling him back. At first, it was subtle, whispers in the wind, strange symbols appearing in the frost on his window. Then, he began writing in his sleep, strange passages in a language he had never learned. A language he understood. He stopped fighting it. He stopped resisting the pull. Because he finally understood what the black stone truly was. It was not merely ancient. It was not merely cursed. It was waiting. And those who looked upon it, those who understood its nature, were never meant to live normal lives. They were meant to return. A fate worse than death. This has been Creepy Misterey, unraveling the chilling fate of those who dare to seek forbidden knowledge. Robert E. Howard's The Black Stone is a harrowing reminder that some places were not meant to be explored, some histories were never meant to be remembered, and some truths will not let you go. What do you think? Was the narrator doomed from the moment he saw the black stone? Did he ever escape? Or did he simply delay the inevitable? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories of horror, madness, and the unknown. Until next time, be careful what you seek, because some knowledge does not set you free, takes you back.